want to start your friendship bracelet by cutting 5 strands of the embroidery floss that are about as long as your arm. Line the strands up and then fold them all together in the middle. Holding the folded end, tie this end in a knot, but leave enough slack so that there is a loop at the end. Now you should have 10 strands, and you can secure your bracelet to a surface with a pin or tape. You want to make sure that your safety pin or tape is securely attaching your bracelet to a surface. This way you can pull on your bracelet and work more efficiently without worrying about it moving all around. Arrange the strands of the right and left halves of the bracelet in the order that you want your pattern to appear. So for example, I want my bracelet to have 2 rows of white, 1 row of blue, and then 2 rows of red. So I'm making sure that on the outsides I start with 2 strands of white on the right and left, then 1 row of blue on the right and left, and then the 2 remaining strands of red on each right and left half. The right and left halves of the bracelet don't necessarily have to match, but this is just how I wanted my bracelet designed. You can't see the process in this first knot very well, but you want to pick up the outermost strand, which we'll call strand number 1, and the strand next to it, which we will call strand number 2. Holding strand number 2 tight in one hand and using your pointer finger and thumb of the other hand, cross strand number 1 over strand number 2, but use your pointer finger to keep strand 1 and strand 2 from crossing completely. In the hole that you are creating, pull strand number 1 under strand 2 and through the hole. Pull strand 1 up tightly until it slides all the way up to the top and forms a knot. Now you can see the process a little better for the second knot. I'm crossing strand number 1 over strand number 2 and pulling it under strand number 2 and through the hole that I created using my thumb and pointer finger. You can see that I've made 2 knots on this one strand. This step must be repeated for the other strands of the bracelet. Now that we've made 2 knots on strand number 2, we want to continue using strand number 1 to make 2 more knots on the third strand. Again, using the process where you cross strand number 1 over strand number 3, pull it through the loop and pull it up tightly to make a knot. Doing this twice. I finished the left half of the bracelet. Now I'm moving on to the strands of the right side. I'm using the same process as I did on the left side, and I'm crossing the outside strand over the adjacent strand and pulling it through the loop and up tightly to the top of the bracelet 2 times. I'm using the outermost strand, which is strand 1, to make the 2 knots on strand 2, and I'm repeating this process on strand 3, which is this blue string, and strands 4 and 5, which are the remaining red strands. In the middle of all the strands should now be strand 1 from the left half and strand 1 from the right half. Pick whichever strand you want to make the 2 knots on using the same process from earlier. When creating the second row of the bracelet, think of the strands that are now on the outside of the bracelet as the new strand 1s. Use these strands to repeat the processes of making the knots on each of the other strands as we did in the first row. So for my friendship bracelet, the second white strings on either the right and left half will be the strand used to make the second rows. At this point in my friendship bracelet, I have about 5 rows done. In order to make a complete bracelet, you want to do about 45 to 55 rows so that the bracelet is long enough to wrap around your wrist. If you're still confused about how I make the knots on each strand, here's a good example. I'm using my pointer and thumb to hold the adjacent string tightly, and I'm using the other hand to wrap strand number 1 underneath the adjacent strand and through the hole that I'm creating using my pointer finger. Here is my completed friendship bracelet. I ended up doing about 45 rows. To tie off your friendship bracelet, you can either make a knot with the loose strands close to the ending point of the bracelet, or you can braid the loose strands, which is what I decided to do. This step is optional. Tying a knot is much easier, but you can see how I braided the ends here in the video. At the end of this braid, I'll tie a knot so that the strands don't unravel. This knot will look much like the one that you might make at the end of the friendship bracelet as an alternative to the braiding of the loose strands. Here's a closer look at how I tied the knot at the ending of the braid. Here's the entire friendship bracelet with the endings tied off. I hope you enjoyed my tutorial and that it was helpful for you.